This screencast has been created as part of my post-placement reflection from my time spent in Moat Community School during School Placement 1. While on placement, I had a first-year group of 24 pupils, one of which had dyslexia. The student was diagnosed with dyslexia in primary school and was deemed within the average range of ability. He is exempt from Gaeilge since primary school due to this special educational need and associated behavioural issues. He is currently in first year, however, is a year older than most of his peers, as he repeated a year of primary school. Academically, he struggles in class, especially with rote learning. He has been placed on a list to receive a laptop from the school to assist with this, however he has not yet received it. A copy of Moat Community School's Special Educational Needs Policy is provided on their website at moatcs.com. Dyslexia is a specific learning difficulty affecting the acquisition of basic skills in reading, spelling, and/or writing. It occurs despite access to appropriate learning opportunities. It is typically characterized by inefficient information processing, including difficulties in phonological processing, working memory, rapid naming, and the automaticity of basic skills. Difficulties in the organization of information, sequencing, and motor skills may also be present. As my cooperating teacher had not yet taught this class group before, I was not made aware of John's learning difficulty prior to my school placement. It was through my observations of his behaviour, strengths, needs, interests, and conversations with other members of staff that this became apparent to me towards the end of my time at MCS. Through referring to my reflective journal and observations, I've grouped John's strong points into the following categories: strengths, attitude, interests, and social skills. Socially, he is very talkative, lively, and outspoken. In terms of attitude, I found that he applies himself better when tasks are relevant to his interests. When he was being reprimanded for bad behaviour and therefore on report, he becomes more engaged in class, his attention span increases, and his behaviour improves. He always offered to help the teacher with any classroom setup or demonstration tasks. A student "Who am I?" questionnaire was issued to this class group at the beginning of the scheme to try and identify their personalities, individuality, character, and interests. From this, I gathered that John is very interested in watching sports such as MMA and kickboxing, and he is a huge Conor McGregor fan. Some specific learning strengths that I noted were: he applies himself best after one-on-one dialogue, explanations, and instruction. He works best when given comprehensive task analysis, focusing on one task at a time. When he applies himself to a task, he creates strong artwork and enjoys this experience of success. With these strengths, there are also weaknesses, noted in terms of attitude, social skills, and behaviour. His social skills have resulted in a tendency to speak out of turn, to ask trivial questions, and to say inappropriate commentary which can annoy his classmates. This tendency was common to get the attention of his peers. He often communicated in a blunt, rude, and disrespectful manner towards his peers. His learning difficulty is also attributed to some behavioural issues, which were very apparent in most lessons. John is very energetic and fidgety, thus rarely sitting still, and often getting out of his seat out of turn. Through conversations with the student, it's clear that he is self-conscious of the age difference between himself and his peers, and he has attempted to take on an alpha male role in the class, which has segregated him from his class group. John's attitude to learning is affected by his poor concentration levels, and he finds it difficult to listen and to follow oral instruction to retain information. He loses interest in tasks and goes off task easily, often trying to justify this with, "Sure, I can't even do that, miss," often before even trying. John was a major consideration in the creation of this specific scheme, as it had the potential to focus on his strengths. Unlike the previous etching scheme planned for this class group, this was less technical and skills-based, with a greater focus on creativity and individuality. There was a heavy focus on digital media and using the Artroom computers to digitally manipulate the portrait photos helping to keep John interested and engaged. It involved more interaction between classmates, as they were often put into subgroups, helping with and encouraging communication. There was no right or wrong outcome in the creation of the mutant portrait, which allowed for the student's self-esteem to build. Each portrait would be different and unique, therefore unable to compare between peers. The following slides firstly outline all differentiation strategies employed throughout this scheme to cater for John's special educational need. This is preceded by 4 specific examples, explained in terms of their rationale, successes and shortcomings. Through referring to my post-lesson evaluations, reflective journal and lesson plans, the success of these strategies has been determined through trial and error. On day 1, students were not requested to sit in any particular order. I had created the poster displayed on the left for each student to sign as a written agreement to abide by the classroom rules outlined. This was also intended to identify their names based on where they were sat. John was last to enter the room, so sat close to the top, in between unproductive and distracting peers. From the following lesson onwards, John was moved to sit at the top of the classroom, closest to my desk, and thus the board for PowerPoint presentations and visual aids. This seat was also closest to the computers, the demonstration and materials desk, the door, and away from the windows, with a space between him and his next-door neighbour to limit distraction. My reasoning behind altering the seating arrangements for this student was to limit distraction and misbehaviour, and also to ensure that John had the quickest and easiest access to the computers for assistance, or the door if bad behaviour needed to be reprimanded. Seating John near the visual aids, teacher instruction area, demonstration and materials area, and away from distractions, worked in both of our favours for the most part. As there was a space left between John and his peers, the level of disruption, talking out of turn and lack of focus was lowered, and thus levels of participation, productivity and creativity increased. This seating arrangement also allowed for me to sit with John without the movement of students, chairs or tables, to talk through tasks one-to-one, and to monitor understanding and progression. This is the form of explanation and instruction that John reacted to best. Through this new seating arrangement, combined with the students' need for attention and praise, I noted how John always offered to assist with classroom setup and materials. I therefore employed him as my helper for most lessons, much to his delight. His willingness to participate and assist was always verbally acknowledged, praised and thanks, heightening his sense of responsibility and thus maintaining good behaviour, focus and engagement. My rationale for this was also to encourage communication and interaction with his peers, where he could be helpful and assistive without dominating the class and being disrespectful or inappropriate. This seemed to be one of the most beneficial and successful strategies employed, as John was able to move around the room, receive wanted attention, display proficiency in tasks, and overall raise his self-esteem. Unfortunately, this was counteracted, however, in one lesson, where John carelessly handled a craft knife, without instruction or permission, that was being used by a fifth-year student in the room at the time. I believe this heightened self-confidence in the handling of materials may have been raised too much, giving him a sense of entitlement to do what he wanted rather than being instructed and trusted to do so, as in previous lessons. This incident also displayed his need for attention and dominance. The misbehaviour was reprimanded accordingly. In order to maintain the confidence that had been elicited in John, and therefore the levels of focus, productivity and good behaviour displayed previous to the incident, I decided to ask John to be my helper in the following lesson's demonstration on safely handling a scissors and PVA and carefully cutting and gluing. The careless use of a sharp object such as a scissors was highlighted to the class group, with the previous lesson's incident used as an example. This was verbalised by John during the demonstration in order for him to take responsibility for his actions. I believe this was a very successful strategy overall, as I did not have any problems with misbehaviour during the duration of that lesson. I am unable to fully determine how successful this strategy was. Due to regular absenteeism, John attended only one other lesson where the use of a scissors was required after this. John did not respond well to reading aloud or to written activities. This was noted in the early stages of meeting the class group. In order to tap into John's creative nature without highlighting his weakness in writing, I approached the task of creating a name for your mutant differently with him. This was assigned to other students as a homework task, whereas John and I carried out the task collaboratively during class time. Outlining the objectives and rationale for the task, I took a seat with John and offered to do the writing while he brainstormed aloud to me. Although he was apprehensive to do this at first, expressing refusal to do so and disbelief that he was capable of doing so, beginning with simple questions such as, what is your name? What are your initials? What's your favourite animal? What animals are in your collage? And writing down his answers for him to see, highlighting alliteration or rhyming words, we engaged in a very enjoyable, successful teaching and learning experience. All other students wrote their names and rationale for their mutant name on their name tag themselves, whereas I wrote John's on his behalf. Upon reflection, I feel as if I should have requested John to carry out this element of the task himself. However, I did not give him the option. I believe his creativity thrived during this exercise, and therefore heightened his self-confidence. So if given the chance, he may have carried out the written task himself, without his routine denial of capability. Through conversations with another teacher, it was established that John required the use of a laptop for his classes, which he had not yet received from the school. This had a huge influence on the employment of digital manipulation of images, using the classroom computers when transitioning into a new scheme of work with this group. As I had noted that John's attention levels increased when relevant to his interests, I used an image of Conor McGregor to illustrate a step-by-step written tutorial on using the software to edit your image. This was broken down into bullet points with both Roman and italic sans serif fonts, allowing for ease of comprehension. The creation of this sheet was mainly to address John's need for step-by-step task analysis to maintain focus and interest. John responded very well to this and excelled at the task, creating more digital portraits than his counterparts. An unintentional, unforeseen result was John's offering of assistance to his peers with the task. He communicated in a respectful, humble and polite manner when helping out his peers, and his levels of creativity, productivity and good behaviour reached an all-time high. I believe the employment of the classroom computers and the accompanying step-by-step analysis on using the software was the most effective, beneficial strategy used. Based on the research compiled as part of our PowerPoint presentations given on March 20th, 2017, in future I would alter handouts of this nature to make them more dyslexic friendly. I would also utilise visually rich aids, handouts and worksheets more. Displayed is an altered version of the Cartoonify Yourself task analysis which I will use in future, based on the readings. Some simple alterations to the document, such as changing the font to Comic Sans MS, heightening the contrast of the text by placing it on a yellow background, numbering the points rather than bullet points, and reducing the word count to emphasize the visuals, have all been listed as recommended strategies for dyslexic, which I would ensure to utilise in the future. Based on my own observations, as well as the research, some other strategies I will endeavour to use in the future when differentiating for a special educational need would definitely be to liaise with other teachers and members of staff to create a common approach.